What's up world? It's your fancy new guy here, Greg Serio, with a brand new lesson. And it's a continuation of our respirator mask mold and 3D print lessons. Our first lesson was 3D printing something we found online. Pretty simple, printed it up, explained where we found it. And it looks something like this. This was the first one that was just found online by grabcad.com, printed. Then we wanted to up our game and see if we can make a copy of that, like prove the concept of pouring a copy. So then it looks something like this. This is the mold that we made to make this copy. So we proved our concept because I don't like to say that we failed, but we learned. Because engineering is strategic failure to see if it's worth trying again. So we know where we failed on this, but we knew it was worth trying again, which inspired this box. This was an idea we had to improve our process. I knew that I used too much material last time because I was only able to make the 2 copies out of this. This thing was huge, it was bulky, I used too much material. So if I knew I was gonna do this again for scale, to have more replicas, better, faster, stronger, nicer replicas, I had to build a better mask and a better mold box. Because usually when you have an idea, it doesn't take money to make things. It just takes the idea and being crafty to see if you can pull it off. Because if I went straight to this, I would have missed a lot of the lessons on where I failed. I would have failed in front of you today. But now I get to show you a cool success because now I have a box where I can make a mold of anything. Because this was a 2-part system, I knew where to cut every single time. If you watched our second video on making this mask, when I had to cut this guy out, imagine the same X-Acto knife having to dig to find your material, destroying your mold along the way. Silicone is amazing, it can heal itself, but it's not Wolverine here. It's not gonna just fix itself. After we set up our box and had it 3D printed, we snapped it together. We used our 3-hole system, and I was able to fill these up with hot glue and seal off the holes I'm not using, but I wanted to have 2 holes there for afterwards so I could push the mold out. And then it just slides right out, just like your ice cube tray when you're popping out your ice. It's nice and slick, but that's also why I sanded a lot of the edges here, just because the smoother it is, the easier your silicone's just gonna pop right out. One thing I learned from the old box is that the side walls were destroyed when I ripped this off. So the only way to fasten this thing back together was just to hold it together with tape. That was really difficult, but then to couple that problem, see how thick these walls are, this distance right here? My knife is only so long, so I had to peel this apart, really dig all this out. So knowing that I needed to be able to have access to my mold and easily push it out of the sidewall so I could use my walls over and over and over, I put these holes on the bottom to match the size, knowing I only needed 1 hole to pour in. The other 2 can be used to push the mold out from the bottom. So I start by putting my box on the plate, filling the 2 holes that I'm not gonna use with hot glue, because then it kind of fastens it to my glass plate, my work area. Then after that, I cut a piece of hot glue to the angle I need to fit it right here on the top. That's where I'm gonna need to pour. So the silicone will pour around that little cylinder of hot glue, leaving my actual pour hole exposed afterwards when I remove it from this mold. Last time, I wasn't able to do that because of how flimsy the wall was. The only thing keeping this together was tape. So I wasn't able to really move it around and squish it the way I needed to without compromising the integrity of the shape of the mold. So I had to kind of keep it still, and really I couldn't do much with it. Now, whenever I have a consistent wall around it like this, I'm able to like move this around after I pour it. So the next step was to pour the actual Oomoo 30, which this mold took 2 sample cases, which was about $50 of material to make this guy. I wanted to use half the amount, if not maybe a quarter of the amount, because I poured too much. See this whole chunk right here? That's like half of one of the setups. That's 25% of my silicone that went to dead space. So I needed to eliminate that waste. That's a huge inventory waste. So it took me about 20 hours all in all between the print the wait time, the design time spent on Autodesk Fusion 360, and the time tweaking the actual print on Ultimaker Cura. So all in all, about 20 hours went into making this prototype. But if you add the time spent prior, this first mask, it took about 16 hours to print itself. So all in all, we have about 60 hours over the last month dedicated to research and development. That's what this process is, research and development. We found out that it was worth investing in, the juice was worth the squeeze, to keep moving this forward based on the concept. If we can mold anything, why not mold respirators right now, because that's what's needed. The perfect part about this mold is it helps you set up the same way every time. The setup is so critical, because if you can have a repeatable setup, it's easier to get to the finish line. So this box provided that standard setup. So now I can cut along the edges with this knife, exposing it after I popped off the hot glue, sealing the corners. I can get that consistent cut all the way around the edges. Once that happens, this is on that pivot. So I'm gonna push down on the mold as I separate the box extender wall. Push down, and as you can see, really nice cut. It opens up and then it just rolls right out, exposing the top part of our mold. So I'm able to get those last little touches, those little fine-tuned edges, cut them all out, and then I'm able to open this up to expose my 3D printed orange mask. But now I'm gonna flip this guy over and then use those holes to really push down on this mold, because I need to flip this mold over to pour my material into. And I'm getting this all set up before I mix my material, so I'm just using the other end of this to push down while I separate the bottom half of this. Whoop. So now I'm going to use my base, flip my mold over, and then once I flip it over, it's just going to fit right back where it was before. We have the seam line a little bit above off center, so I can just take this other extra wall that used before, flip it upside down, and just push it over the side walls. The whole form fit function of this is to seal off the edges, so now I can hold my mold where I couldn't before. Now I have a nice hard wall of plastic where I used to have a thin sheet of plastic tape. And this drastically improves my process to make this easier and repeatable. So this stuff is called Smooth Cast 300, which is left over from our last lesson, which is part A and part B. It's that 1-to-1 ratio where you can pour this amount and you have to equal the same amount you pour in this cup. So I'm only going to pour a little bit into the first cup, and then I'll pour A smooth on into that cup. Then I take my part B and pour equal parts into the second cup. Now that I'm ready, this stuff cures really fast. It cures in about 5 minutes. So the minute I pour this part B into part A, it begins to cure and harden. It gets a little bit hard, but it also gets really hot. So I want to pour this quickly, but still keep consistency. So as I pour this in there, you kind of start to see it burp. That's the air bubbles coming out of all the pockets. So as it starts to fill up, you want to kind of tap the mold, but now, because I have the box wall, I can hold it and move it around. So you want to wiggle it, wiggle, just a little bit. And then you'll see more room open up inside your mold. Then proceed with pouring more in there until you have the same result. Once it fills up here, you just wiggle it around again, making a little bit more room, and then repeat that process until it doesn't do that anymore. You'll stop seeing the air bubbles pop up through the top, and then your mold will be full. It takes about 10 minutes to fully cure and get really hard. So what do you do in that 10 minutes? Play with your Legos.
Hey Daddy.
Oh buddy.
If you wore headphones and you ran as faster than the speed of sound, would you be able to hear music?
That's a great question. I don't know.
We should test out.
How should we test that out? I'm asking you.
Without further ado, we've waited our 10 minutes. The big reveal. I'm going to start by taking this top wall off. Same concept as before. I'm just going to push down on the top, let it come off, roll it off the side. So I'm just going to leave the base on there because it helps me grip it. So now that I've poured this into the top, we've waited, let's do this. Oh yeah, I'm going to break off this top. I don't want to ruin my mold, because this is where my overpour was. There we go. So we had a little bit of a bleed out around the sides, so maybe next time when we pour this, I push down on the top a little bit to make sure it seals up really nice. But so far so good. It filled up all the corners I wanted to. I could tell it didn't quite seal up right here in the center, which is fine, because this is such a thin layer that it's probably just going to break right off along the seam line. So I can come back after this and it comes right off. And if it's not coming off right away, then I can just hit it with the X-Acto knife. So then the next step is I got to pull it out of the second half. So I'm just going to grab this little nugget, slowly pull this guy out. Look at that. Look at how consistent these edges are. And then if you remember on our last one, when we poured it, we left that big air bubble there. So that part's already gone. That's exciting. But also, it was able to mold our little people emblem. There's some slight imperfections, but that's because of the design itself. So we're just gonna make the logo a little bit bigger and finish up the hole. But we made a perfect copy of this, perfect-ish. But you see how this just breaks right off along the seam. So knock this off with a little bit of sandpaper. You get those nice smooth edges. This part, you can pop that right off. I'll use my Dremel or something for that. But I wanted to see how well my mold box is gonna work, because I'd rather mold a whole bunch of these, stack them up, just keep stacking. But it's thinner and it's a little bit more pliable than before, where this was rigid and crinked. Ugh. Because we did those taps and we were able to wiggle this around, we have a lot of consistency here. The walls all the way around matched up. And then even our little holes on the side, they didn't quite match up on the top to bottom, but I can just clean that up with a tool afterwards in a secondary op as we improve our mold process. So I know that this will just sit right back together and I can do it all over again. Whereas before, I had to break it apart like this. Now, look at this as our first mold, and then look at this as our second mold. You can visually see that we improved here within a week's time, just because we thought to just get started. This is really, really ugly looking. But we proved the concept, so we made it better. Now, we can take what we learned from this lesson and continually up our game as we learn to make better molds, different materials, 3D printing this complete. The sky's the limit when you level up. So we thought to level this up, and now I can repeat this over and over and over versus just twice and then another 20 hours to make 2 more. My cycle time on these increased drastically just by having a repeatable process. So what's the lesson learned today? The lesson learned today is that by 3D printing a mold box, to make a replica of your 3D printed parts gives you consistent results and a repeatable process for you to make molds of all your stuff. If you enjoyed this lesson, make sure you like this video and share this to everyone you know. And then hop over to YouTube and go to Fancy New Guy and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fancy New Guy. See you there.
What's up, world? Your Fancy New Guy here, coming to you digitally from my computer screen. Here to show you a little bit how I made my box. There are other 3D printed parts, and maybe you can get some ideas from it. So I'm going to start by going down here to Autodesk Fusion 360. Double click that bad boy. Fusion 360 is a great way to get into CAD modeling. You know, if you don't know anything about it, very user friendly, and it's a really good way to go if you're just an at-home tinkerer or with inventor, or really just about any kind of maker can benefit from knowing how to use this stuff. Myself, I don't CAD model full time. I do when necessary, and this is one of those necessary times just because it was that simple and great opportunity to teach you guys something cool. So opened up is basically where I left off. I'm going to go over here to my mold box concept prototype. So I'm going to pan this guy over here, kind of show this thing off a little bit, give you a little explanation as to why I made this box the way I made it. So if you notice, I got these holes in the bottom. I put these here because I got to put the mask inside. I was going to say orientate, but I'm not sure if that's a word. But either way, I have to put that mask inside here and then hot glue it to the bottom, and or in the future I can thread these and put little threaded standoffs in there. And I like to make just one box because in a different software I'm going to show you how I can scale this up or down, because I just really need to make this box once, because I can use this box again and again and again for different applications. But without further ado, I got a seam line right here. So originally, my first attempt at making a mold, my blue blob, or my purple blob, kind of fell apart. So I wanted to come up with an easy system to where I can get a nice consistent cut. So I have these seam lines here because I fully intend on being able to use an X-Acto knife to cut around it once I have the mask in place, or whatever else I'm molding. So what I really would like to show you, I'm going to click over here because I want to hide this box base, give you an idea of what I'm working with here. See this little lip? I'll get an underneath view. With this little lip, I just wanted one little pivot point that I can put in there, because this has to pop off pretty easily. So I didn't want to have too many crazy fancy fastening mechanisms. So all I did was just put a half circle in there, so it's a full radius when it comes out, and it'll be easy to cut along the seam once I do that. Zoom back out. Excuse my burp. So now, when it comes down to it, I can do cool stuff like this. I'm just gonna click move. I'm gonna click this guy right here, and I'm gonna, whoa. So when I remove my mold, it's gonna do something like this. Zoom out a little bit so you can see it better. And I wanna move it right there, actually, right there. Now it's in the center. So, by orbit, no, stop moving, and we're back. So, see this guy right here? I want to be able to take it off the mold to expose the top half of the poured liquid once it cures. So it's essential to have a little radius right there so it can kind of bend all the way out. I love radius. I love radius. Oh no, too far. I'm going to stop it right back there. Cancel moving that. Zoom out. See, I was going to say zoom in, but I zoomed out. So I turned it into zoom out. So now that we're done with this guy, all I'm going to do is go to this file, export, and I'm going to export it as scroll down to STL file. So mold box concept prototype, and I have to know where I'm saving it to. So for now, I've been saving it in the desktop. I've already got 1 or 2 in there because I've already printed this, and I'm coming back behind this to show you where to save this. So I'll hit export, and now it's rendering out into that type of a file. I'll give you a little status bar. So this type of file, STL, is one of the easily recognized files in Ultimaker Cura. This rendering process takes a while, so for anyone that has to render any type of digital product, videos, anything, pictures, details, like it's a lot of data that you're moving in and out, so it takes a while to render. So while it's doing that, I'm just going to minimize this window, and I'm going to go to our Ultimaker Cura software. Ultimaker Cura. So this is what it looks like. Pretty basic, really easy. Bosco is what we call our printer. So printer number 1 that we have here is Bosco. That's our Ultimaker S5. I'm going to click File, and I've already printed from this file, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up Mold Box Concept Prototype version 2. Click Open. Whoa, what is that? That looks like our box. So I'm going to click on it, and now I can do this cool stuff like rotate it, or scale it, or move it. So for now, we're going to move it because this is only 1/2. Pretty easy, just move it right over here. Let's make some room, because we're going to go back. See this mold box wall extender? This is just the second piece of the mold box. So I'm going to click Open. Bada bing, there it is. But if you remember, this part right here, this radius bevel, that shouldn't be facing down because it's got the little lip. So what I'm going to do with that, so I want to get a little bit different view here. So I'm going to come over here. Which one do I want to flip this on? The green one. And now let's flip it over. Rotate it 180 degrees, and it should snap right back down. So then now I have this little lip part printing upward. So now the base can print nice and flat on the glass. So I'll go over here. I like to switch our view back to the front, zoom out a little bit. So I'm gonna move. Now I'll just oh, grab the wrong one. See how it highlighted the green? I want to move it on this axis. I'm just going to scoot it over. Then we're going to grab this one, scoot this over too. See what it looks like from above. And just because I'm being OCD, I'm going to move that right there. And then I'll be a little bit more OCD and move that right there. So when I print this in my printer, it'll look just like this. Now, it's got orange highlighted because it has all of our materials preloaded up here. This communicates directly with our printer over our network, so whenever we upload a new material, it knows and it tells me right here. It's so smart. So when I come over here, a couple little settings I want to check before I click print on this thing. The layer height. This is the height of each layer in millimeters. Higher values produce faster prints and lower resolution. But our wall thickness. So how thick of a wall do we want that goes around this? And then it's a 1 millimeter thickness wall. So these are 3 millimeters thick per our drawing. So the center of it is going to be empty. Hollow. They call that infill. So here we're going to look at the infield density. This is important. We're only going to fill the inside of these walls 20% with material. So now that we got this all loaded up here, we looked at our print speed. The temperatures are preloaded for the material. This is a really easy software to use, and there's a lot of help. So the support material, this is also very important. When it comes to printing some of this stuff, if you look over here, this has an overhang where this little radiused edge is. If we didn't have support material is what they call it, it's material that's printed layer by layer up underneath it for the new actual 3D printed part to lay and rest on and cure. Because without support material, this would just be printing on air because it's overhung. It's still attached to the part, but it's overhung based over your glass plate. Let's come back over here. Our support extruder, it's going to be the same material, and it prints just a small amount because whenever you pull your part out, the support material usually just breaks away. Or we could use what's called PVA, which is a water soluble, where you just have the support material that dissolves in the water. We're not going to need that here though, because that adds a lot of time. Because as you see, now that we have these positioned on the base, we'll zoom out a little bit and click slice. So it's slicing it, which means it's telling me how many hours it's going to take to slice this thing layer by layer. How many hours? Total hours of print time is 15 hours and 27 minutes to print this product. Now, remember, I had this to fit my son's face, not mine. So it was about 20% smaller. What if I need a box to mold some of my bigger stuff? We'll go back over here. Go back to the prepare. See this option? Scale. I can scale this up. Say I wanted to scale it by 120%. Just makes it bigger. So then, because it matches with this, I got to make sure I scale that too. 120%. So it makes everything 120% bigger. So I'm going to look at the top again, see how this looks. All right, let's move it over a little bit. And click this one. And move this one over a little bit. So as you can see, I'm going to be able to print this box by box. So I have a 20% bigger box than the one I've already printed to fit my son's mask. That's why I wanted to make a single box and a single design so I can scale it up here. So like in the future, I have a whole bunch of green lantern rings that I want to make stuff with. Click prepare again. Say I want to scale these down to, say, 30% the size. And make little baby mold boxes. Come back over here. 30% of the original size. I can come over here. Whoa! And I hit Control Z to undo that one. But now I have two little baby boxes. So say I want to print multiple of that version. I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Here's another wall extender. %, the original size. So now I have two wall extenders. Whoa, gotta stop doing that. So let's look at this from above. Now I have my original box. Remember, I want to make one design for multiple purposes. And then I can come back over here. And now I have a little baby box for a whole bunch of my green lantern rings that I wanted to make. And then I can also make copies of all of them because now I have perfect little boxes, and let's see how long this will take. 1 hour and 16 minutes to print little baby boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and get that printed so I can show you that too, because I want to make some green lantern rings, but I want to show you that this little box can make great possibilities and solves a whole bunch of our problems, and it could solve your problems too. Now, make sure you watch the rest of this video because you'll actually be able to see my face. Bye!